In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers Podcast. I am Greg Gaston, joined this week by Tim Buckley, the Daily Memphian Deputy Sports Editor and Senior Writer, and our producer, Natalie Van Gundy. This will be our final Daily Memphian Tigers Podcast, so I do want to give a shout-out to two of our other regulars, Parth Upadhyay, the Tigers basketball beat writer for the Daily Memphian, who has been quite busy with a lot of the rumor mill going on right now as far as Penny Hardaway putting his staff together is concerned. And of course, Frank Bonner, the Tigers football beat writer, for a great job on these podcasts and covering Tigers football for the Daily Memphian. So shout out to everybody. All right, Tim, it was a busy Saturday afternoon. The Tigers culminating spring practice with a scrimmage game. They've had Friday night stripes in the past. Last year, they did an afternoon game on a Saturday. They come back with one this time around. Just overall, before we talk specifics, just your general thoughts of the day. Obviously, it's not a huge crowd, a little concerns with weather. It's not like they're ever going to get 20,000 people, but it seemed like the people that were there enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was football weather in April.
It was.
Gotta love that. There was an awesome dodgeball game. The tug of war, was fun. Now, I don't know. I counted like 8 against 3, but it was 3 very large Tigers, including Xavier Hill and Jonah Gamble. The students won the tug of war poll. A couple of teammates jumped in and tried to back them up and say it was 10 against 1, that they didn't stand a chance, but that was fun. and then there was the whole football thing. And you know what? That was fun too. It was just glimpses, and it wasn't real deal or anything like that. And, some of it was scripted, and it's not a true game when it just kind of ends on a late touchdown and everybody says, okay, we're good. But you got a good glimpse at Mario Anderson, the transfer running back. She got to watch all the number 2 quarterbacks. Seth Henigan looked absolutely fine, like he does. Henigan and Mario Anderson were on the same side. That kind of had some people just kind of raising their eyebrows going, yeah, there could be a lot of this next season. There was the young freshman running back, Bodiford, who looked pretty impressive. And even, Ryan Silverfield had some good things to say about him. So, and perhaps the most important thing of the whole day, and Silverfield said this much in the post-game presser, nobody got hurt, which frankly is always a huge concern in these things, because I've seen spring games where guys are lost for the season, either blown out a knee or broken leg or whatever the case may be. So they made it through clean, which is a big deal.
It certainly is. Not two-hand touch. I know they can't touch the quarterbacks, but there was some hitting going on. I was down on the field, and I heard some smacking around a little bit of the shoulder pads and things of that nature. So, yeah, it was a glorified scrimmage. There's no question about it, but there was some hitting going on, and certainly you want to come out of that unscathed. They did, most important thing. But the theme I got and have gotten over the last 4 months since the AutoZone Liberty Bowl game was played, just how confident this team is about 2024. I mean, to a man, to a player, to a coach. It's not one of those, we have a good year. I think we can have a good year. We are the team to beat in the American Conference. That's how much confidence they have, Tim. And I've never seen anything like it. And I started covering Memphis Tigers football at the very end of 1995.
Well, they should be confident. I mean, they're coming off a 10-win season. They beat a Power 5 team in their bowl game, in the Liberty Bowl. They got their starting quarterback coming back. They've got a quality transfer running back uh, moving in to take the place of Blake Watson, who was terrific in his one season. Along with some other returning running backs, including Sutton Smith. They've got, they've got skill. They've got a lot of skill players coming back. They should be solid at receiver with Rock Taylor coming back and Demir Blankensee. Were there losses? Absolutely. I think Chandler Martin on the defensive side is probably going to be one of the biggest ones. But they got a lot of reasons to be feeling good about themselves just from a football perspective. And then you throw in all the other stuff that's going on with the program, with the stadium and the NIL funding, and the fact that Ryan Silverfield has some job security. Why not beat your chest a little bit?
Absolutely. I want to make sure people understand with Chandler Martin, what Tim was referring to, he wasn't able to go because he's rehabbing from an injury, but he expects to be ready to rock and roll in camp in August, lead this defense.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous season for him this past year.
But he didn't get to spring. Yeah.
Didn't get to participate in the spring, nor did several of the offensive line. And as you know, the offensive line is always the key question, especially when it's schools aren't named Alabama, Ohio State, and the powers that be. The offensive line is pivotal. That's why you have to be very open to grabbing junior college players, high school players, portal players, whatever it takes to make sure you not only have quality offensive linemen, but have depth. And there were a couple of guys who Ryan Silverfield expects to be battling for starting jobs that will participate in August and in the fall, but did not participate because of injuries. So that's always the question mark. We don't know exactly what position each of the linemen will play. Will Xavier Hill move over? Is Jonah Gamble going to play center? He took snaps at center. So is that going to be his position? I asked him on the sidelines, and he said he wasn't sure. So that is something certainly that we'll keep an eye on because it's always so pivotal.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those that you're talking about is Jalen Nichols, who also is transferring in from South Carolina. He was out, all spring injury wise, but he could end up being your starter at left tackle. There's a transfer from Marshall that they didn't have for the spring, Trent Holler, who, and again, reading between the lines, and the dust will settle in August, but sounded like a candidate to play center, if not, one of the guard spots. Again, but reading between the lines, it seems like Gamble, spent a lot of time getting that experience, but he might be more somebody who starts somewhere else and then as a backup option at center. I think for everybody involved, the snaps were a little adventurous, to say the least, in the spring game, because I know I looked up early on one of those first drives, and I saw the ball popping up in the air in a direction it wasn't supposed to be. But that's what happens in the springs. They were shuffling guys in and out, and think about it too. This wasn't like all your starters against all your backups or anything like that. It's like some of the combinations that they may have actually been working during the spring, you got to split it all in half, because now you're splitting your squad in two. So
exactly.
I wouldn't read in too much into what I saw from the line play just in that one scrimmage on Saturday, but it'll be interesting to see how all those puzzle pieces kind of fall together late in the summer.
Well, you mentioned Seth Henigan coming back for a fourth year as the starting quarterback. So since day one that he arrived on campus as a true freshman, he has been the starting quarterback for Memphis. It has to be incredibly rare. I don't know if there's another school, another program that has that situation this year. Maybe they have a quarterback who's played 4 years but has been there 5 years. I don't know for a fact whether or not there is, but it is unique. But it also gives you an experienced quarterback who has played with a lot of those guys, like you said, especially the skilled position players on offense, where they have a rapport. And that gives Memphis certainly an advantage to have a quality player like that and a leader like that in Seth Henigan.
Yeah, yeah, you get both the production. He's their career passing yards leader, and that's not by mistake, but it's also a product of the longevity. And then you get somebody who is clearly respected in that, not only in the quarterback room, not only by the coaches, but I think throughout that locker room. So that's absolutely huge as well. And that's probably one of the reasons why they're looking at him to, perhaps be the favorite going into this season when you got the coaches poll happening later this year. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of falls into shape. He's one of those guys, Seth Henigan, that he you can presume had the opportunity to go other places. Ryan Silverfield didn't directly say that, but he was kind of hinting at it with some of his post scrimmage comments on Saturday. But he decided.
Oh, I can confirm that, Tim. Tim, I can confirm that because Seth told me point blank that he had other opportunities to go. So whether or not it was, schools contacting him when they shouldn't have been, but he had those opportunities.
Yeah.
And after talking with Tim Cramsey, talking with Rock Taylor, they all decided they were going to stay, and Memphis is the better for it.
And I think one of the huge reasons that he did, and you just mentioned it there, Tim Cramsey, the offensive coordinator, it seems and sounds like Seth Henigan has a fantastic rapport with him. And the fact that Cramsey stayed, I think had huge influence on the fact that Seth Henigan is still in Memphis. And perhaps another small part of it too, but not to be overlooked, is, you know what? He's the son of a coach. His dad obviously is his high school coach, head coach in Texas, and you could tell that Seth Henigan is somebody who was taught to do it right, both on the field and it seems off the field, and that goes to the whole. You know what? You make a commitment, you stick with it, you see things through, and that's what the kid is doing. I love him too because you know what? He steps up and he answers questions. We've talked about this a little bit before. Win or lose, he's kind of the de facto team spokesman. Not necessarily self-appointed, but he's absolutely embraced it. He does a terrific job with it. He gives pretty good insight, even after a loss or whatever. He's not one of these ones who dodges, and he's got a great sense of humor too. Ryan
He does.
was kind of deadpanning after the scrimmage. We know who our starting quarterback is as of today, and Henigan, who's just sitting right there next to Ryan, his only response, total deadpan, was awesome. It's like you gotta love that.
So 2025 is going to be weird because Seth Henigan won't be the quarterback. That means the possibility of one of the 3 or 4 that they have also on the roster, or possibly somebody that they'll bring in the future. But you did a story about one of those guys vying backup quarterback position. Again, it may not be that important this year. That's the hope. But God forbid, if something happens, they have to be ready to continue on with whoever that may be. And there's quite the battle going on.
Yeah. They both Henigan and Silverfield were just raving when asked separately about Arrington Maiden, who's a 17-year-old freshman out of Texas. And, the last one of those that the Tigers got panned out pretty well because Seth Henigan was 17 when he came in. The difference is, they both came in, after graduating early in high school, and so they came in time for spring drills prior to their true freshman season. The difference is Henigan won the starting job, right out of the gate. Arrington Maiden won't be doing that and doesn't need to be doing that, obviously, because of Henigan's presence. But he raised some eyebrows. Look, he's 6'2", and I think he's listed at 204. He looked like a 17-year-old high school kid who ought to be at prom. Which, by the way, I think the running back Bodiford actually did on Saturday, play in the spring game, and then he went back to Atlanta literally to go to the prom on Saturday night, from what Ryan said. But Yeah, he's got a nice pocket presence, Maiden. And then he created a little bit outside the pocket. They didn't score on his drives in the scrimmage, but for a 17-year-old, he looked the part to me. But there's a battle for the number 2 job. Neither particularly experienced. Harris Boyd on the other side, redshirted the last season. They got a transfer in also with Marshall ties and Cade Cunningham, who's a year or two older than those other two. So it'll be interesting to see who actually gets named the number 2. Ryan kind of hinted it a little bit, and what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing, but what he basically said was a bunch of good things about Arrington Maiden, and then he threw in, but hopefully we don't need to see him a lot next season. Now, look, I think that was a reference more to, but hopefully Seth Henigan, is healthy throughout the season, and there's
No question
need, to play a lot, but it'll be interesting to see who they list as the number 2, or it's one of those double or situations.
Mm-hmm. We see that an awful lot.
Yes,
all right. So one of the other themes was the FedEx NIL deal, which certainly has excited a lot of people in the city and every student athlete at the University of Memphis. And as you know, I was doing the sidelines where my interviews were going up on the Jumbotron, and every time I had a player on, not everyone, but a lot of them would make a reference about FedEx, and rightly so, because they are pivotal to this city and to this program. And so to hear that and to hear the appreciation of the players is great. But the most important thing is that it will help Memphis certainly move into this new era, which we've only been in for a few years, of name, image, and likeness. And it's interesting, Tim, that the first commercial that ran about FedEx with players in the commercial included Mario Anderson. And Mario Anderson has been in the fold now for a number of months. And this deal was in the fold for several months as well before it finally was announced. So it seems like, just putting 2 and 2 together, that Anderson, who comes from South Carolina and the SEC to Memphis, may be one of the first beneficiaries of it.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And it's kind of frustrating that we really won't know how the money is spread out, because so much of this is done in secrecy, and they're not exactly transparent with what's going on. I'm not just talking about FedEx. I'm talking about the whole NIL situation. But yeah, you would assume that he's going to be one of the beneficiaries. Now, he obviously was secured and in school and in camp long before the deal was made official, but the deal was probably, far enough along that they were confident they'd have enough to take care of him, whether it was through the FedEx money or their other 901 fund NIL money. But yeah, I think, it's going to benefit a lot of people, not just football, not just basketball, but women's basketball, some of the other women's sports. And yeah, you heard FedEx a lot on Saturday, rightfully so. I hope that doesn't become a constant, frankly, with press conferences and everything, because, well, I just hope it doesn't. But but it comes with the territory nowadays. That's what they do. And I think I heard you drop enough FedExes the other day too that I am fully expecting you to be on the other side of the door when my next package gets delivered.
I expect to get some residuals from all those mentions of FedEx.
There you go.
So as far as the wrap up of this spring session, and again, there's only so much you take out of spring, but what we've already talked about, the confidence in this team, the players that are coming back, there may be a few new players that Ryan adds in this portal period, and that probably will happen. It won't be a mass number, but it'll probably be a few. And then, of course, the players that will be coming in the summer that aren't available now. This is going to be, as you talked about earlier, not only a confident group, but a group that I expect, when the preseason rankings come out and things of that nature, that they will be picked to win the conference And I'm not sure if they do a preseason player of the year, but I think certainly Seth Henigan could be the American Cup preseason player of the year. Tulane will get some love even though they lost their coach. UTSA is a good program even though they lost their quarterback of 90 years, Frank Harris. And there are other teams on the rise. But this is shaping up for Memphis to not only get all the preseason accolades, but hopefully the most important thing is when it's all said and done, they get the postseason accolades. It's a big season. It's a long wait until August, but we're excited, and I think the fans are excited too.
Yeah, 90 years. Man, I thought I was the one prone to exaggeration. Look, there's a whole lot of reasons for everything that you're talking about. Now, look, there's also some question marks too. The defense, there is a lot to replace. I mean, Canton and Arku, the linebacker, Jeffrey Canton Arku, big loss. Simeon Blair, transfer from Arkansas, only one season with the Tigers, but significant loss. Jalen Allen, huge loss, especially in the leadership department, the defensive end. And then you lose one of your starting quarterbacks who we talked about last week, who went into the transfer portal, and Diago Brumfield, who only spent a year in the program, but started, I think it was 11 games. And I think it was actually on Saturday that he put out his commitment. He's headed to Mississippi State. So, you lose out of the secondary in two SEC caliber defensive backs with Blair, who was one, and now Brumfield, who's going to be one. So
right,
there might be some people who wonder what's going on with the defense. And of course, it's a different look coordinator wise, and it'll be a different look scheme wise. But even with all of that, there's every reason in the world to expect that expectations will be very high for this team.
Well, shifting gears for a few minutes, talk a little Tigers basketball. Again, Parth Upadhyay not with us, but I can guarantee you he is busy because the rumor mill is churning. There was another player in this past weekend for Memphis. There were two that were supposed to be. They ended up canceling. Who knows if they'll be rescheduled. There's rumors that maybe Musa Cisse will come back to Memphis. He's back in the portal after playing a season with Ole Miss. So there's a lot still happening with Penny shaping up his team. He's got a lot of players. He started out very well by getting Haggerty, by getting the players Dane Danger that he was able to get the young man from Wichita State who was a terrific three-point shooter. So they're doing fine, but they got a lot of numbers still to get. And who knows, by the time we finish taping this podcast, they may have another player. But the most important player that people are wondering about is David Jones. And David Jones made not a surprising announcement, but make a social media announcement about his future.
Yeah, and I would go so far as to say it was a fully expected announcement, which is he declared for the draft. But look, he retains his eligibility for now. There's a cutoff date for when he's going to have to decide to keep his name in the draft or whether to withdraw and decide to stay in school. At this point, if he does decide to withdraw, there's no indications that he's poking around elsewhere. So, that seems like it would work in the Tigers' favor, that if he does decide to stay, it would mean staying at Memphis as opposed to going in the portal and playing for what would be his fourth school in 5 or 6 years. It all comes down to what sort of feedback he gets. Look, the way these things work is before that date, he will know, and there's a whole process where they give him basically a draft grade and some expectations on range-wise where he can be expected to go, and it's usually pretty legitimate because, the general managers are, they all have input into that, and it's all done anonymously, but they give those guys a pretty good indication of, your lottery pick range or your, middle to late first round range or your late first round, early second round range, or you might be a second rounder, or you don't have a chance in heck at getting drafted. And that influences the decision making. It's good that they do that so that you don't have kids, making really poor decisions. Some of them make it anyway because, they're headstrong, confident, cocky, whatever the case may be. But whatever that feedback is will go a long way, I think, toward David Jones's decision making. Right now, he doesn't show up on a lot of the mock drafts. I know a lot of the inside front office people in the NBA also are formed in mock drafts, not because they're mock drafts, but because they mock the mock drafts.
Yeah.
So not too much is necessarily to be read into that because you know what? Once these guys get in for individual workouts, usually they'll go in with a group of 3 or 4 similar position, and they'll sit and they'll do their one-on-one FaceTime interviews and all that. Things can change, and the other part of it is it only takes one. It only takes one to fall in love with you. So who knows? But until that happens, it just leaves a huge degree of uncertainty in terms of what roster needs are, and that'll influence some of the decision making on portal pickups. So it puts you in a tough spot, but it is what it is.
I think it puts you in a much tougher spot than in years previous, before the portal, even before NIL, and I'll tell you why. Years past, you think about a roster was pretty much in check. You knew who was going to graduate. You knew who was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone was jumping into the portal. There was no portal. Maybe you'd get a transfer, but most of the time, players would for a second year, for a third year, for a fourth year. Now, you might have one of those players that wants to test the NBA waters, and you wait out that player. But right now, we live in a time where they have to fill a roster. Penny seemingly every year has to redo the roster. You have a certain amount of money. Now there's more money in the coffers from the deal with FedEx, but it's not unlimited resources. So you have to right now go out and get players to fill other holes while not knowing whether or not you're going to have to fill the hole of David Jones not being here. And if he's back, then the whole NIL thing's a whole nother story because he's a foreign-born player. He can still make money, but there's little things you have to do that are a lot different than an American big player or American-born player. So I think it's a lot more complicated now, Tim, for coaches to try to put together their roster, even waiting until the end of May. They can't wait. They can't afford to wait. But even though it seems like it's only a short time away, which it is, about 5 weeks, it's still got to be a long time for a coach trying to put together a complete roster.
Yeah, it is. The Tigers have some experience with it last season, though, with the whole DeAndre Williams situation. Similar situation, different circumstances. Obviously, he was waiting on an eligibility ruling versus this being a draft declaration situation. But the good news for the Tigers in that regard is DeAndre Williams, or uncertainty over his waiver request and subsequent appeal ran right up against the start of the preseason camp and
Sure
basically even the start of the season almost. And this will be a known entity one way or the other late in May, and that makes a huge difference as all this kind of sorts itself out.
A couple of other quick notes. Javon Quinterly was invited to Portsmouth, which is for seniors, college seniors, to perform for NBA scouts and NBA personnel. Former Tigers, now that they've jumped into the portal, have new landing spots. As Jonathan Pierre announced that he will be playing for Belmont, so he'll stay in the state of Tennessee and play for Belmont. Also, this was a couple of weeks ago, in case you missed it, folks, Jalen Young, backup point guard, wasn't used a lot by Penny Hardaway. He is headed to Vermont. We're not sure about Ashton Hardaway or Carl Sharonfont, but it is a lot of changes. Those changes will continue with more additions to the roster. And again, Parthu Pajai, all the great folks at the Daily Memphian will have you covered, whether it's Tigers basketball, Tigers football, or all things University of Memphis athletics. It has come to that time, Tim, where I have to thank some folks and say goodbye. First of all, thank you, my friend. It has been a pleasure working kind of directly, and then a lot of these podcasts indirectly. We're in different locales, but it has been a hoot, to say the least.
Yeah, we've had a blast, Greg, and I can't thank you enough for steering us and carrying us throughout it. Really enjoyed it. Glad we got to do it. And it's been a lot of fun.
And to Natalie Van Gundy, what a terrific job as our producer. And she's had to deal with a lot.
I second that.
I mean, first we were all together in a studio, and she has to go ahead and get everybody all together and, check our egos at the door. She is just fantastic at what she does. And of course, as I said to start the podcast off, Frank Bonner and Parthu Apajai, just terrific at what they do. Frank, of course, covering Memphis Tiger football, Parth covering Memphis Tigers basketball. I want to remind everybody, be sure to check out our other podcasts. The Daily Memphian's Food Podcast, Sound Bites, is hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is the arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies Podcast is also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Personally, again, I want to thank everybody at the Daily Memphian for allowing me to be a little part of what you guys all do with this podcast. I've had a blast. I want everybody to have a great summer. And again, this fall, looking forward to what could be a very special football and basketball season for Memphis Tigers athletics.